The following podcast contains adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey there. So, we're coming to the end of Season 2. We started the season taping our very first episode right here almost 1 year ago to the day, where we posed the question, where do we go from here? Well, we had no idea of what was yet to come. It was a roller coaster for a lot of us, but we had some great education along the way, especially right here through the show. You know, each week we ask our guests and panelists to come share intimate details about their lives, their experiences, and their feelings, all in the spirit of genuine openness and vulnerability. So it would be inauthentic for me not to do the exact same. Divorce. That was always a topic we planned to cover this season, and the only way I can do it authentically is to share my own experience, even as I'm navigating these waters myself. I've often talked about being divorced from a previous marriage, but I've yet to share what has been at play in the background through most of this season. But the challenge is it's so much bigger than just speaking objectively. It's speaking above and beyond the now and my raw feelings while still honoring those feelings. It's not implying details or storylines. It's not about that. And I hope by now you know that's just not the spirit of this show. It's about the human element. It's rarely black or white. It's rarely about who's right or wrong. This isn't about villains or victims. It's not about heroes or saviors. There are no winners in divorce. Everybody loses something. So as public as the world tries to air all the dirty laundry involved with a divorce, that is not something I care to do, and that's not what we're here to do today. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack it, where we share our feelings and talk through how we get there and what we do to survive it. I'm not trying to paint a picture of anything other than where I'm at and how I feel, and largely what I've already experienced in the past. Because there is a major question that looms, and it seems to be universal. When it comes to divorce, you want to ask the question that plays through your head nonstop. Is this the end?
And I wait for you to pick up the phone. Darling, call me, I'm home. I don't care whose stupid idea it was to break up.
Find a safe space and turn up the volume. These folks are going there. Taboo topics are back on the table.
So welcome to a very unfun episode. We have some really awesome guests today. Everyone's here to share some stories. And yes, what you heard me say at the very beginning, you're probably now going to want to go back and rewatch some episodes and look for clues and blah, blah, blah. Don't waste your time. I will say, yeah, that's been in motion since almost the very beginning of Season 2, but we were co-producing episodes together, so, you know, any of that drama you're looking for just is not going to exist. But hey, you should go back and watch every single episode, share with all your friends, get all the detectives on the case, and see what you can figure out. Where did it all go wrong? I don't know. Okay, so first let's introduce our guests. We have with us one brand new face and voice on the show. On the end, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name's Joe Yensel. I'm the co-owner of the Cole Center and going to be here to talk about relationships today.
The Cole Center sounds really familiar because he is married to somebody on the other end of the table, Dr. Y herself. Reintroduce yourself, please.
Hello, I am Dr. Jen Yensel. I am the co-owner of the Cole Center. And we've been together for 25 years.
Yeah, close to that.
And have 4 kids together.
Yeah. And so we're going to test the strength of their relationship here today on the show. And whoever wins, they either get to rub it in our faces or we get to tell them we were right this whole time. It doesn't matter. Other divorcees joining me are on both sides of me, returning from the recent mental health episode, is Natalie.
I'm Natalie Duvnjak. I am a licensed occupational therapist. I am a divorcee, and I also provide mentorship for people going into a new chapter of their lives.
And she always forgets to mention she's also a mom.
Even though that's a mother. Also,
I have 2 children. They still exist.
Yeah, they still exist. And one of the returning guests who's always a great time, my who I want to be when I grow up, if that ever happens, to my left, Mr. Peter Toomey.
Oh, God, but no pressure, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I am Peter. I'm dad of 2 and grandfather of 5, and a couple of months past a final hearing from a special lady. But I'm sure you're going to ask about that.
I think we should talk about it. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for being here. This is one of those, like, for me specifically, this is an unfun conversation. And as I stated earlier, it's not because it's because I have to talk about it in the most general sense while I'm going through it. And usually I get a lot out of these conversations. Today, I feel like I'm here to help us navigate a conversation at a level that doesn't quite suffice what I'm looking for. But it would be, like I said, just inappropriate to do it any other way. So today we're going to talk about the inevitable but just heartbreaking topic of divorce. When you're married, it feels like everything you've been working towards, you've built your life around this relationship, right? It's not just this compartmentalized piece of your life. On the end, these two disappear. Maybe this is why you're still married.
What?
You went,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. Except for the fact that you kind of co-own a business together. Yeah. Okay.
You can divide that pretty quickly.
Maybe I will learn something from this episode. Okay. So, yeah, but in a lot of cases, it feels like, you didn't compartmentalize. It wasn't like, here's my relationship. I keep this at home, stored away neatly, and the rest of my life is a separate entity, right? It's like there's overlap in every aspect of your life when it comes to your partner, more often than not, for me specifically. And everything's enmeshed within it. This podcast, this isn't a business. This isn't a friendship. This isn't a hobby. This is this passion project. And still, couldn't have been more intertwined with all the relational pieces, which is what made this season nothing shy of a miracle that we're at episode 24 to even get here, right? And so when that ends, it kind of feels like everything is ending, some form of it. And I think there's some truth probably to that. According to the American Psychological Association, approximately 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce, which this was not my first. This was not your first. I believe that was your first. She was married at 12 years old, so it had to be. I'm kidding. I'm joking. Jesus Christ. She looked at me like,
Hey,
really?
You do you. It's all good.
Are you Mormon? No, it was not her. She was not 12 years old. The divorce rates for second marriages are even higher, obviously, with the approximate like 60 to 70%. And that doesn't mean, though, that if you're saying, well, half marriages, 50% end in divorce, that means the other 50% are successful. That does not mean that whatsoever, right? What is your guys' overall feeling on divorce? I think things have changed from a societal standpoint, right? It's not as stigmatized as it used to be. But it's also this thing that seems to loom everywhere. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business. In the psychology field, you guys do couples therapy, and you see people talking about wanting to get married, being married, post-marriage. What's kind of your high-level thought or view on divorce as a phenomenon in our culture?
I think if you answer like divorce is a phenomenon, I think we have to look at what is marriage. Like marriage can be also a phenomenon, and like what that means to people also probably I think correlates to what divorce means to people. So I think my definition of marriage and divorce are probably interrelated. So I guess I'm going to throw that back to everybody else. What is the definition of marriage to everybody, and what does divorce mean to everybody?
Joe?
Right.
And this is being like recorded on the record, by the way.
Whoa.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what marriage is. I know what our marriage is. And, I think as time has gone on, and relationships are different than they used to be, and expectations of relationships are different than they used to be, and not one definition works for everybody. I think of, a good Italian husband, that whose sauce is the best.
Yeah.
Well, my grandma's was Chef Boyardee, and her grandma's was, something else. And when we talk about relationships, I mean, just the complexities of those things, and, how we define them and how many people are involved in them. And romantic relationships is way different than it used to be. And then we talk about friendships and kids and how we define those things. But, I think at the end, our marriage is based on two individuals that we try to respect each other in our decisions, and that's where it comes from.
Peter and Natalie, would you say your definition of marriage changed from the time you were in the marriage to now being out of it?
Oh, hell yeah.
How so?
Well, just because time goes by. Joe's comment struck a nerve that my view of my relationship changed over time. And I think society's view of relationships and more important, and that's at this level, but more important, people's views and expectations and desires of what's coming out of that one-to-one relationship change over time.
Yeah, we change as humans.
There you go.
As individuals. So, of course, the relationship is going to evolve, devolve, whatever you want to call it. How about you? What's your view? Has your view on marriage changed since you were in a marriage?
Yes, it has. So when I was in my marriage, I didn't have anything to compare it to aside from, what I grew up with, and then also, the merging of the two families. And so he grew up a certain way and I grew up a certain way. So we would each compare it to what we knew. And then we were trying to make ours work. And, when I was in it, I was trying to keep it together. And it was from a place of like, well, hey, I heard this works and I heard that works. And so I was trying to keep something together that probably should have fallen apart earlier, or sooner than it did. But now that I'm out of one and I'm on the other side, I can see, all the red flags or things are like, oh, this could have, I have a different perspective on it. And I have a greater appreciation actually for a relationship, a marriage.
There's so many things I want to jump into in each of these, but let's start high level. The history of divorce, right? So, again, it's all based on marriage. Marriage was seen as this, it's a religious right to many people. And it was seen as like, you're doing this in front of God and all of your friends and family. This is not something to take lightly, which I don't necessarily disagree with that idea, but it was just one of those things that was almost impossible to get back in the day. I think one of the most famous ones was Henry VIII, right? He wanted to have a son. He wanted kids. His wife couldn't do it, so he had that one of the largest legal battles in the 1500s. He has to fight the Pope because he will not annul the marriage, and so he essentially makes himself the king of the church. And Anne Boleyn comes in, and that whole story plays out. And so, in some ways, I actually think divorce is a very good thing because it's a tool that was not always at our disposal, not to be Henry VIII, but for example, even in modern day Iran and some of those countries, women cannot file for divorce. They cannot, the man has to offer the divorce. And so it's used as kind of a control as well, which again is tied directly to how they view marriage. And so in some ways it's a freedom that I think I kind of, even as it sucks really bad, you kind of appreciate that it exists. Are there any other historical pieces of divorce and marriage that pops into your mind when you guys think about?
I think a lot of the traditions and the thought of marriage predates even Henry VIII. And we're talking about Roman culture, that a lot of those things, so we're talking about a contract.
Yeah.
They weren't by love. It wasn't, they were arranged. So we're bringing people together for a bigger purpose than just that. So, and annulling those marriages had to do with breaking contracts.
Right.
So we're carrying these traditions that we don't really understand, and even indoctrinating our kids into them at an early age. And, like, we're going to play wedding, or I'm at a play date with my kids when they were 3 or 4, and parents were saying, oh, they should get married. And what are we talking about? This kid they're just having fun, and they're relating to each other, and we're already talking about how can we couple these people and have this relationship that and we're setting them up for this.
I think something else to think about with marriage is that there's also, like, I think we're all heterosexual, that same-sex marriage has been, and even like interracial marriage has been a different thing. So I don't want to like diminish that and the impact that has had, but there's a lot of benefit to the marriage where you, like, if you're not legally married, you don't have some rights. So I think I don't want to undermine that. But I think when I'm using marriage here, I'm thinking of like what I deem to be a marriage and what I think of like the emotional part of a marriage. And that, to me, as somebody who's very privileged, it doesn't have to do with the legal stuff. I think if we weren't legally married, I would still feel married to you. Yeah. And that doesn't, I don't wear a wedding ring or anything like that. Like, sure. It doesn't, it's a mental state.
Right. But marriage is universal across the globe. So it's not just a Catholic or, a Christian ideal. There's people being married that are agnostic, and they're just, that's, people believe in coupling.
Marriage. Marriage is.
So, because a lot of it was survival too. You're better off if you're going to tackle this world when you got somebody by your side. And so I think a lot of people would probably define a successful marriage as like beyond just a best friend. Of course you want it to be, but like a partner. It's like, in a lot of ways, even if there's no contracts, it is a business. It is a business agreement. And that's like, okay, you're going to handle this, I'm going to do this, and you're going to get this, and I'm going to get this. And that's why, even though you enter into it so romantically and so oftentimes so, intimately, the degradation ceremony of the back end is where it falls apart. Not only publicly, it's so opposite of what the original intent was, is I think why divorce feels like the worst thing in the world, even though, again, I see value in it being there, but I think it comes into how we look at marriage. So for the women on the panel, did you, like growing up, like Joe was saying, did you pretend? Did you play bride? Did you pretend, you were getting married? Did you marry off your dolls to each other? Did you marry off the Barbie that looked like you to a Ken doll or another Barbie doll? No judgment. Like, that's important.
No, absolutely not.
None?
No.
I could have guessed that, but I didn't want to make assumptions.
No.
Did you play with G.I. Joes instead?
I did not. I was raised with a lot of trauma. I was not there. So the idealizing marriage, it was not a goal. It was not anything that was like, oh, this is. So I don't know what I played with. I played out in the dirt and the mud and cooked and baked it. I did other things, but it wasn't. I never fantasized or even compared my family, the people who are happily married, to, oh, this is what I want. I think that can be a dangerous thing.
Sure.
All right. So
be honest.
I'm going to be very honest. So I didn't grow up with good role models of a good marriage. To be honest, my parents are still together. I don't know if I can say happily, but that's not my business. But growing up, I didn't have an example of it, but I had people around me in my family that had good marriages. So, even as a kid, I can kind of tell, like, well, that doesn't seem right, or that's not love. That's not what love is from what I, thought at that age. But I did grow up with my cousins, and we would play house, and I knew, like, as a kid, I would fantasize, like, okay, when I have my family, when I have my husband, I'm going to do it this way because I know that this doesn't work. And obviously I didn't think of this at like the age of 6.
Sure.
But like, you know, as a teacher, I'm like, oh, I can't wait till I have a family. I couldn't wait to start a family because I'm like, I'm going to do it. You know, because my parents would always say, oh, wait till you have yours or wait till you get married. I'm like, I can't wait till I do it because I'm going to do it different. And I did in a different way.
and the thing is, like, even, you know, I have 3 sisters, and even the ones that were more girly than the others who would kind of like play wedding, or they would try to marry me off to my cousin, and you know, even them, it was never modeled after my parents, because I think a lot of the idea of marriage is what we see in the movies and we see in Hollywood is like a young pretty girl and a handsome, you know, like Disney fairy tales. That's marriage. This is some old boring people who hate each other, you know. I didn't see a lot of correlation between what they thought of getting married and what a wedding was and what it ended up being. And I think, to me, that's very telling of how people still to this day view it. They fantasize about the wedding day, but put no thought into what comes after. And that's just my personal observation.
I found a survey about why people get married, and it's love, making a commitment, companionship, and then it goes down to like financial security.
Yeah.
So, you know, we can be in love for sure, but it needs to have more there behind that. And I don't think when we jump into the $20,000 wedding or more.
Oh, $20,000? Yeah, you guys got married 25 years ago. You mean the
Still throwing a
runaway?
number.
Yeah.
$200,000 wedding.
Yeah.
It was fabulous.
It was fabulous.
It was great.
Oh, $20,000 is all I would want. Yeah.
Yeah. But we put this pressure on ourselves to have this fairy tale,
Yeah.
and we don't get to the difficult pieces of being married when you start a family and you have to make choices about, are we going to get groceries this week, or are we going to pay the house bill, or what are we going to do and how are we going to navigate that and deal with all that stress? Or they hand you a kid at the hospital and say, you're on your own and you don't know what you're doing, and you spend 3 months awake.
And
Consecutively.
that's great. I'm so glad you said that because that was my next question is, you know, especially now, modern day, knowing that the divorce rates are high, knowing that the odds are against you, why do people still get married? I'm not saying people shouldn't. I'm asking each person here, why did you get married?
I'd make a global observation first to the comment Joe made about parents talking about kids at 3 or 6 or whatever getting married. I think that reflects what I feel is a pretty global expectation that that's a good way for things to happen. You know, you made the comment a minute ago that it's good to have a partner. Well, I think, you know, globally that marriage is the right, or at least formal partnering is the right way to go, the best way to go, the easy way to go, kind of thing. I'd also agree that people come into it and go, oh, you know, let's have a big party and, oh God, I got to go home with you after we get, you know, they never think beyond. You know, you made a great point. Okay, not never, but they aren't fully looking at, I didn't, you know, when I went to college, there was the girl back home that I dated when we were in high school a little bit, and then it kind of grew from there. And well, what do you do when you get out of college? Oh, you get married, you know, and, you know, well, I guess the first thing you do is get a job, you know, and then you can buy your first car, you know, but then you get married. And the kind of getting locked into that thinking can be pretty darn dangerous.
But I feel like it's more so expectations. You know, it's like these expectations that whether it's societal or cultural or your own, you know. I know I was like 30. I'm 35 now, but when I was younger, I was like, man, 30, I want to do all these things by 30, which is so ridiculous. But I wanted to finish school. Okay, what's next? I want to buy a house. I want to, I have all these things that I put that pressure on myself. And, now I look back, I'm like, why was I in such a rush?
And why is a marriage part of your life goals? Because that's not something you can fabricate. I mean, you can, and that's why we're all sitting here today. That is something you can do, but a relationship has to be unlike a job search, unlike all of these other things, hobbies that you can make a step towards making it a happy reality. It's not something, it's an organic thing that it involves people other than yourself. And it has to be as equal as possible. And that's why, so one of the things that I've just noticed, and I'll probably say this again on future episodes if we get there. Is this the end? I don't know. Is there another one coming? I can't say. So the reality is you have a lot of people, and I think it's women because women are told success is this. Remember, even one of my favorite movies that has such a good moral tale to it, It's a Wonderful Life. When he never existed, now his lovely wife is an old maid working at the library. What a failure.
Yeah, because it was either or.
And that's my point. It's you're an old cat lady if you don't, or you're this quirky young girl, eating breakfast in front of the Tiffany's window. It's that should not ever be this benchmark goal as far as I want to be married, because the problem is, and I've noticed this a lot, and it's not any one person's fault. It's the cultural norms and the expectations, as you said. You need to be married. So a lot of women have not only planned out their entire wedding down to the dress and flowers, they've picked out the tux. They just got to find a guy who fits into it. I can't imagine how that would go poorly. They've already basically built their entire lives without putting into the equation literally 50% of the formula. Yeah. And so it's more of the idea of, I need to accomplish this more so than I would like to have a really happy, relationship and partnership. And so I think, and of course you're taught that. It's not your fault. If that's put in your mind and you don't have an easy time looking outside those norms and parameters, of course you're going to perpetuate that same story.
Sure, because that's key. To Natalie's point earlier about how she learned what to expect. The shrinks would know better than I, but I spend a lot of time listening to people telling me that
he's paid a lot of money and he wants his goddamn money's worth from you.
When you're this big, those giants in your life are critical to your survival, because you have this sense that if they weren't there, I'd be cold and hungry, and when you're this tall and when you're this tall and when you're this tall, you're looking at those giants in your life, and the way they do things must be the way things get done, and consequently, I want a girl just like the girl that married your old dad is more true than you might realize, because that's where I learned, And I'm not talking necessarily about my dad, my mom, but I think that's how humans learn. So we come to that, and if that's what we're seeing reflected around us, that's why my comment earlier about kind of societal expectations that this is the right way to go. That's what we grow up and into, and then we end up right where you said. Yeah.
Well, I think the term successful marriage is thrown around a lot. And I don't know anybody knows the answer to what that definition is. And is a successful marriage one that lasts 6 months and you were happy and then you walked away from? Is one like at the wedding where you're the last one standing on the dance floor because it's been the longest be a successful marriage, but really you can't stand each other other times of the day? We measure marriage on its success, and we never ask the question, what is success? Mm-hmm. So if it ends, is that a failed marriage, which is the other term? But maybe it isn't a failed marriage. Maybe it was just time to end.
For the two people still married at this table, wouldn't you say your definition changes every day? I mean, in the sense of what made it successful yesterday might be different than what you guys have to do to make it successful today.
Well, I think
you have one foot out the door on this one over
Yeah,
here. I
I
would
think-
start.
Yeah.
Did you sign a prenup? I'm just kidding.
we had nothing to
No,
sign.
but I think, yeah, we're like, no.
But I
The
think
lint in my pocket.
we were
goes
talking
to
to
you.
family a few weeks ago, and we were kind of joking about the fact that your parents were all on 3 or 4 marriages
Sure.
each.
Yeah.
And you have multiple siblings that are all half siblings.
Yeah.
So I made the comment that I feel like I've been married 5 times to you because we've changed so much.
And your multiple personalities all play a
Right.
different
Totally
point
fair
in
then.
each week.
See, but that's
Do you
the
think
point.
success changes? Sorry.
No, go.
No,
Like, I don't know if, like, I don't know how often I go, like, oh, is our marriage successful today? Are you happy? Are you living the life that you want? And then I go, am I happy? Am I living the life that I want?
So success is, are we individually happy?
I don't know
Not
how
happy, but
Yeah, happy is a weird construct.
Yeah.
You're always
Fulfilled.
Am I
Are we-
fulfilled? And am I pursuing a life? And I think I'm just doing it with somebody who I unconditionally love, and I believe unconditionally loves me. So I think success is not. It's hard to have a successful marriage without 2 individually successfully.
I think it's a bad
fulfilling
term.
happy.
Would be my.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I measure it. I think that's a dangerous thing to do.
because even what you define as fulfillment each day might change too, right?
Sure.
Right. We're not the same 25-year-old people that got married. We have 4 kids that are almost that age now. I mean, it's like we had to change. And I think I would throw out the word successful marriage and I would throw out the word failed marriage because it's not fair.
And those are black and white terms.
Right.
It's either yes or no. And there's nothing in life that's yes or no.
But I feel like, too, you're each going to grow individually. And as you're growing individually, are you guys growing together or are you guys growing apart? I feel like that's important to note because, like you said, when you guys got married, whatever age it was, compared to now
24,
when you have
yeah.
the children, you guys are like different versions of yourselves, but you're still together.
Yeah.
And you went through it together and made that commitment to one another.
So maybe the term, and maybe one, it doesn't have to have a term, but maybe the term you might use to somebody who is trying to take a temperature check without asking the wrong question is like, is it a healthy relationship?
Yeah.
And I think the more that you grow together, or growing individually and together, it is an organic, healthy thing. That still doesn't mean is going to last forever or couldn't even end tomorrow. Like there's so many things that could end it,
For sure.
but that also doesn't make it a failure.
No, I think it's the failure is when we don't acknowledge that. And when these things end, if they do, we look for villains and we try to find retribution and we forget, and I'm saying this as somebody that hasn't gone through it, so forgive me if I'm stepping on something, but we forget the person that we loved and we cared about and we start to talk to them as it's their fault that we're having this failure, or we need to feel better about the failure because we were in the right, and we villainize those people. And that's, I think, the real failure in the marriage.
I think that goes to, again, this cultural and even universal idea of when it ends, it must be because somebody didn't live up to what they were supposed to do. What do you see when you're doing couples therapy, and especially if somebody's working through a breakup of any sort?
It's a load. I mean,
Well-
so I think there's research on what makes marriages succeed and fail.
You can't use that word. Joe doesn't like it. Healthy.
Sorry.
Please stop doing that.
So the Gottmans,
What makes
right?
it successful is when a woman listens to you
Right.
and understands.
You follow direction, makes it
I agree.
successful.
I'm delightful to be married to. Like, there's nothing to argue about that.
She would say that too, yes.
That wasn't funny.
Dr. Y pissing off other panelists since beginning of season
yet
two.
another woman telling me I'm wrong. But
That's called a trigger, and you are re-traumatizing him. Thank you.
I can help you. Let's take some deep breaths. I think, again, it's very unusual that when I'm doing couples therapy that I'm not recommending people do individual therapy on their own, because I think it's so much pressure to go, I'm not happy unless our relationship is happy. I need you, like, one of the big things with relationships is that everybody can self-soothe and be able to know their own triggers and be able to regulate. And everybody knows how to communicate. I know how to express my concerns and frustrations and likes and dislikes without questioning someone's character, right? Or if those bids for attention. We know that there's all these things that go into a healthy relationship. Now there's caveats, right? Severe mental illness. There's all sorts of reasons, trauma, like that I would say those are maybe not outliers, but I'm not looking at that when I'm talking about couples therapy.
Sure.
But there are certain things that we know make it successful. But I think I always go back to, what is a marriage? What does that mean to somebody? Yeah. And to me, it's hanging out with somebody legally who you unconditionally love. And if I unconditionally love somebody, I just have to figure out how do I want to be treated, and how do you want to be treated? And there's things to do that. But if you don't, I don't get a lot of people in couples therapy who are like, I unconditionally love this person and I want to do things.
Really?
I don't think it's the first.
It's not the first notion, because they're there because somebody is mad at somebody.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we do. I mean, I do get that.
Sure.
I say that for sure, we do get that. And the sooner people come, awesome. Pre-marriage, all of that.
Yeah.
When it's really, I would say, ugly. When people are past a point, sometimes they forget that they do unconditionally love somebody.
You made a good point a couple weeks ago when you were talking about middle ground.
Oh, yeah.
You can expound upon it, but you talked about, like, if you consider middle ground way outside my middle ground, we're never going to get there. So I just want him to meet me halfway. Well, nobody ever defines what halfway is, and we're always arguing or missing that mark.
When halfway is defined as, I need him to be a different human altogether.
Right.
Or it's just meeting me halfway.
I have trouble paying attention sometimes and don't notice the dirt on the counter. But it's not intentional. But had she been a different person, she would think I'm being intentionally difficult.
Yes.
And I'm not. I'm trying my best on a daily basis, and that's our goal, but I miss things. And she's focused on it. I remember in my previous life, my previous job, they left a paper clip behind the door, and they wanted to see if the cleaning people would get it. And it sat there for weeks. And every day they got more and more angry about this paper clip on the floor. I can't believe they're not cleaning it. Well, they missed that they cleaned the entire rest of the building. They just didn't close the door and look behind it. So in marriage, if you're hiding paper clips around your house and trying to trap them, that might be an issue to work through.
Because then you're probably just trying to validate your own feelings that already exist based on something that you're not giving the person a chance to either hear why you're upset and see what they can do, or accepting them for who they are. There is no amount, like abilities and skills. You will never learn to be in a more observing person. It is your personality. That is an ability thing, and that is baked into you.
Right.
You can learn how to, for example, if there's tasks oriented to it, and you can put some things like, hey, listen, when the dishes are dirty, don't put them in the sink, put them in the dishwasher. Okay, she's giving you no credit. I'm saying the average human being.
What I'm saying though is that I have to stop asking him to, like using the kitchen as an example. I don't think you're never going to clean it the way I want it clean.
Right.
And that's okay. That's who you are, because you don't see it, and I want it to look like a model home, and that's okay. But you're more important.
I said we are related. My good God.
But you're more important. And so if I know when I want the house more clean, and I will walk into a different door of the house because I don't want to see it, because it feels personal. It's
and
not your
because there's
fault.
a paper clip back there that's
not your
never
fault.
been touched.
That's not. Why is that? Why would I?
It's a good reminder to look at the bigger picture of things. Like, yes, that's like a small thing that bothers you, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of good qualities.
Of course.
And you're like, I'm not going to overlook all of that just because of that minor.
And that is a
Absolutely.
subjective thing that bothers you. Instead, and the people took it upon themselves, like, oh, this is actually me being bothered by something, as opposed to this person doing it. You know, it's like he's not intentionally doing that
Never.
to bother you.
Would never.
And it takes that kind of unconditional love to be able to step back and say, oh, I get it. I do want to touch on, though, one thing that you said, and I think it's a very important point, is when it comes to couples therapy, that's why it's so important to do it together as opposed to single, because as soon as you're separate, you are putting you, whoever the therapist might be, in a position where your goal is to help this person. But if their goal isn't to be helped with the relationship, but to walk out of there feeling validated and reaffirmed in their views, that's what they're going to take. Because you often tell them, oh, you feel really hurt. Why do you feel hurt? Tell me about that. And they'll walk out of there. My therapist also agreed that you hurt me and you're an asshole. You know, it's like, that's why, like, if your goal is to win the fight or to be right or to be validated in being pissed at your partner, you can find that anywhere. Like, but that also means your main goal is not to work on the relationship. And that needs, I just feel like that's such an important point, that because it's more often men, I think, culturally, who are like, I don't want to go to therapy. Like, we can just fix things ourselves. We're obviously equipped for it. My dad had a successful marriage. He beat up my mom every night, and they stayed together for 57 years. So, yeah, couples therapy is really important. It is one thing that will, it's not that it's going to stop you from getting divorced, but it might push you to make the right decision sooner as opposed to drag things out, because that's how it's always been done.
I would say there's, at least at our practice, we do have a lot where it's one person sees one therapist, another person sees another therapist, and then there's the couples therapist, and we'll all get together and talk because, oh, this is this person's story, this is this person's story, and we're role modeling that we're not, this is everyone's lived experience. It's not, we're never going who's right or who's wrong. We're role modeling for them, oh my gosh, this is their experience, and how do we bring that together? So I think there's no, when done effectively, it can be really helpful to have individual and couples, especially when we don't know what's going on.
I agree. Yeah. I agree, because personally, when I was in my marriage, that's what so I'm a therapist, but I would go see a therapist because I think therapy is a great thing to do. And to have a therapist, to have somebody that isn't related to, doesn't have a certain opinion or anything, it's nice to have a neutral person. So when we went together our first session, and then we would go see her individually. I stayed committed to seeing her, and whether, it was his choice if he wanted to go or not. But the intention was to see us separate, to kind of get a feel for, where each of us are coming from, and then come back together. But I always wanted him to want to do it, not feel like, oh, I'm going to do it because you told me to, because then I just feel like it's not taken seriously. Right. And we once went to a therapist, and it was that experience. It was like a referee. That wasn't a therapist there, it was a referee, because I was sitting there, I was like, this isn't even real life. This isn't. And I was like, this is not what I thought we were going to come here for. And, we didn't have a successful experience there, but also both people have to want to go in there.
Yeah. You have to be willing to listen to what the other person has to say, and not, if your mindset is, no, screw you, I'm right and you're wrong, and you can say whatever you want, but this person's eventually going to agree with me, I think you're doing it wrong.
You're not there for the right reasons.
Yeah, you're not.
But you also might not be in a marriage for the right reasons either. So, you don't know.
I think that's what comes out sometimes in the individual therapy with the couples, is that as someone gets healthier and more self-reflective, they realize that they're better, they deserve better than what this marriage is.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, is success, because now I'm a healthy person and I need to end this relationship, which isn't a failure, because I'm a better person now and I'm better prepared to go into the world and find something I deserve.
Yeah.
I think a huge failure.
And you've taken away the friction of the situation that, that you need to end, because that's just debilitating for both parties.
Yeah. Natalie said that in the mental health episode, that you can't expect to get healthier if you're still in the same environment, the thing that's making you sick. And for a lot, your marriage has the most impact on you if you're in it, you're fully immersed in it. Like that can make you the best version of yourself, or at least enable that possibility, or it can, be a toxic environment. What are you guys willing to share? I'll start. My first marriage, I want to know why people get divorced, because there are the common themes, but it's usually way more layered, right? It's usually a recurring theme that rears its ugly head. It's sometimes one simple thing, but that, again, plays a lot into why people get married in the first place. My first marriage ended because we had the inability to communicate effectively. That the longer we were together, the more we grew apart in our life goals, the more we grew apart in just kind of what we wanted from the other. And there was so much frustration and friction, as you said, towards the other person. And by the end, when it actually ended, it doesn't mean everything went so smooth, we were both so tired we ended on a high five. I was like, do you want to because we did the therapy. I'm not saying the therapy was, we tackled it very differently, and there was a very different mindset. One person was a little more screw you than the other, but none of it was based on hate, and I think it rarely is. I think you're so hurt you go more inwards. But by the end, it was like, I'm fucking tired. How about you? Yeah. What if we just split the shit and call it a day? It was like high five. And it was like, I can't tell you how relieved I felt that day moving forward. There were still some shitty times, but it ended because we wanted different things. We were growing separately, not together. And we had a harder time seeing things from that person's point of view. And of course, a marriage cannot survive like that unless it's put in the background and you're like, I'm married, but that's not really who I am. Are you guys willing to share anything about what led to a demise of a relationship?
I have 2 children. Well, we had 2 children. And, I had this idea of what it would be like to raise this child. And the child came, and we entered parenthood on equal levels. Like, I was never a parent before. He was never a parent before. And so I feel like sometimes when you do have children, it brings things to surface even more. Things that maybe weren't loud before become a lot louder. So, I was willing to work on it, push through. And he was too, because we both said, we're in this for the long haul. We both had that attitude, but also I know I was thinking well, okay, that's so great that he's in it and I'm in it, but we're not happy. We're not happy. And then, time was going by and I'm like, well, maybe this is a rough patch. Maybe this is a rough patch. It'll get better, because that's the hopeful side of me. And I did want more than one child, So we ended up having 2 kids, and then we ended up having another house. So it's almost like we were doing these things, but nothing was changing. And I just felt disappointed. I was just like, this isn't what I had pictured for my life. And I feel like I'm doing life with a person that we're not on the same page. We're not even on the same book anymore. And now it's not just me. I'm not just thinking for myself. I have 2 children who are relying on both of us, and I feel like we're doing them a disservice, and I didn't want to repeat things. So I knew it was time to end it.
I want to say something. First, thank you for sharing that. And secondly, I think the one thing that people forget about is, hindsight's always going to be 20/20. It's nearly impossible when you're in it to recognize the difference between a red flag and loving someone unconditionally and trying to learn to work through a character flaw or a clash of personalities. I think it's easy after the fact to be like, I should have recognized right away that he was an asshole because of this, I'm not saying you're saying that. But a lot of times, because people would be like, Matt, with the first marriage, it's like, didn't you notice this? I'm like, yeah, but that's also what unconditional love is. It doesn't mean you don't work on it, but yeah, I knew these flaws going into it. You love someone despite their flaws. And so it's almost impossible when you're in the relationship to go, this is a red flag, because then everything's a red flag, right? We have such a hard time with nuance in those relationships. So I think give yourself credit. Sometimes we look back and go, I was so stupid, but also I think it's important to give ourselves grace and say, at the time, I thought I was doing what made the most sense, that I was being kind and loving them in spite of this and trying to find a new way to care about Joe, even though he's a messy bastard and will never clean the kitchen.
That's true.
Peter?
Well, I had a couple of conflicting thoughts as you were talking.
That's usually how people communicate with me. Do I love him or do I want to punch him?
But because nobody's perfect, you're right. We pick people and think, I can make this work, and I think this will be good, and yet, because of the way we were raised, we have these expectations. We have these yardsticks. Okay, well, how's it compared to what I'm thinking? And we tend to do a little judging, and I know I did, and that makes it hard sometimes to give up the judging, because that's different than the judgment.
Yeah.
It's different than what I thought, but it's the fact that I'm yardsticking.
Yeah.
You give up the judging, and because you realize you're doing it. And instead just go, okay, wait a minute. This is somebody that I love unconditionally, great term, and we got this going on. Well, which is bigger? Is it the this going on, or is it the fact that I love this person unconditionally? And I'm not good enough about going, oh shit, I don't love this person unconditionally, and come on.
Yeah.
It's going to be the two of us, maybe even against whatever it is that's going on. Because I think there are times when I didn't cling closely enough to her as a partner, and have the two of us go, wait a minute. We're talking about this, in our case, again.
I think most cases.
Yeah.
We never argued a day in our marriage, but we argued today, it's over.
But is this really important enough? And we just kind of got stuck. Kind of going back to whatever the top. As a matter of fact, there was a time. Joan was I think a great family counselor, and we were in there for a decade, working on, and finally it came to, the two of us were sitting on the couch, and Joan's sitting there going, okay, what do we want to work on today? And we said, this, whatever the hell this, it doesn't matter, whatever the hell this was. And Joan went, wait a minute, you want to talk about this? Yeah. Again? Oh, because we've talked about this, people, and I thought we'd resolved this. People, why are we talking about this again? Because we hadn't come together enough to be able to deal with whatever this was, and either.
And that doesn't mean that this wasn't
important.
Wasn't. It doesn't mean that this was more important than the unconditional love.
Oh hell no! And that's the problem.
Yeah, it feels.
That's the problem because we got stuck into this, and that was the next word Joan said. She said, you're stuck. You're back again talking about this. You're stuck. We've been around and around about this. I thought we had a deal about this, and now we're back talking about this again. And we had gotten maybe not more focused on this, but just we'd lost it's the two of us against any of this you want to bring up.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, too, when we would go through, periods of time where we weren't seeing things eye to eye. Also, the environment during that time. So we were just growing apart more. So it almost felt like we were roommates inside of the house that we lived in with our children and I just felt like I was playing house again. Like as a kid, I was like trying to make sure, in front of the kids, everything's fine, or try to touch on subjects after work or, in the evening. But then it would be like, I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed. And in the morning, well, I have to get to work. So it would just get pushed off, and the communication was not effective. And yeah, the relationship felt like a roommate type of situation. And, it just created a greater separation, like a greater wedge.
And I'll touch on this from previous relationships. You're talking about the yardstick. I think that was a great way to put it, because the yardstick causes a lot of problems. And take away the judgment for a minute. The yardstick is a measurement of success. Oh, how come we're not doing this? Or how come we're still doing this? And it's this constant measuring of something that these two people are never going to do that. It's like you can't measure success of a relationship based on this cookie cutter mold that is a successful relationship. And so you have somebody who'd be like, oh my God, if my grandma knew that we did this, she'd be she'd be devastated that you don't clean the house or something. It's like whatever it might be, the yardstick needs to go out, because the two people who enter the marriage are every relationship is unique exponentially because you have two people who are also unique and not like anyone else. And the yardstick thing, I think, is just that cultural expectation. And one thing that I've heard many times, and I've worked on it because I kind of see how I play into it, is remember how you were like when we were dating? It's like, yes, you want to go date him? Go back in time, build a time machine, because our relationship was different. I evolved, you evolved, the relationship evolved. However, I can see it's sometimes you unfortunately evolve past the things that the other person really liked about you, and vice versa. But it's the measuring stick, I think, that often gets in the way of actually saying, hey, you know what I would really like? I'd really like this. But instead we go, oh my gosh, we were so romantic back in the day. Yes, because, we were horny for each other. We were young. We barely knew each other. Now we see each other sitting on the toilet. Some of that's gone, but we can find new ways of capturing what you need. Joe, have you never seen her sitting on the toilet? Don't answer that question. What would you say is one or two common themes of why people call it quits?
Ooh.
I'm not looking for data here as much as
Oh,
what
I
you've
can't
seen.
do data.
Okay, do data.
People keep score, right?
Huh?
People keep score, and they dig in.
Yes.
And
Contempt.
Contempt, the four horsemen.
Yeah, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? Contempt and I think expectations.
Of the person, of what marriage is,
Both.
everything. Yeah.
Both. Yeah. I mean, if I put an expectation on you or the relationship, I have to communicate that and someone else has to agree to it. And a lot of times people are like, I have this expectation, it's in my head, and if somebody doesn't meet it, they suck. And I'm like, oh, that's you?
You've been
You've
You're
the
there.
victim
No,
of it?
I've been there. Yeah.
So you talk a lot
He was
about
like,
thoughts and feelings, right?
Yeah.
And how my thoughts and my feelings don't always communicate into the world.
Yeah.
So I have my own feelings or thoughts about something, and I put those on expectations, and then you fall short of them, but I've never told you.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not nice.
So then tomorrow you have I have resentment because you didn't meet that expectation, and then I do it again.
Right.
And then 10 years down the road,
It's too much.
it's too much. And I've put too much weight on this relationship to solve problems that it can't solve.
That's huge. I think, in my personal life, in any of my relationships, even non-romantic, that is a recurring theme. Is that I find people want you to be a mind reader because in their assumption, they've communicated what they want. But everyone has a different communication style. So like, not only do you have to learn theirs, but try to get them to learn yours without there being so much friction that you can't get past that initial.
What makes you vulnerable?
I was going to
It makes you vulnerable to have to tell people what you want.
Yeah.
And then either they're going to do it or they're not. It's a lot easier just to assume they will and then be disappointed internally.
Just to be clear, he's being sarcastic.
No, I am being sarcastic.
He is, but he's actually making a point simultaneously,
Yes,
which is
yes.
the beautiful part,
But
which is obviously the only reason you two ever ended up with each other. Because knowing her, the little I do, now it makes perfect sense.
I think I wake up and I'm completely dumb to you. Like, I think that it's dangerous to think I know you better than I know myself. And it's hard enough to be human and a mom and a working mom and a wife, let alone and to figure out my own stuff, let alone to figure out that I know my stuff and I know your stuff and you also know my stuff. Like, that's bizarre. So like
I'm
every
still
day,
learning my stuff.
right? We're still like learning.
Yeah.
So I have to communicate because I don't even know what I'm thinking, let alone
And it's not
anticipating
even
what you're thinking.
It's not even that people I think that's what people get caught up is like, I told you. It's not that you weren't communicating. It's that you weren't effectively
Understand.
communicating.
Yeah.
Because, it's not like we have those headsets from, what was that, Demolition Man, where you can just kind of have sex with each other through the brain and have conversations.
We should do that.
You should. It takes away all of the risk of contracting COVID.
We have
and
shells at home, too.
STIs, and the 3 shells.
Yeah.
So you have seen her sit on the toilet. Okay, perfect.
Oh, God.
Inside jokes. That's
Back
over
to the
a lot
topic.
of
Come on.
people's
Here,
heads.
I don't think you have.
You know what? But that thing about
vomited on you.
understanding the other one was there, and it was we really ought to replace this couch, and well, yeah, but the budget right now that we're on, doesn't have the new couch in it, and it was heard that we aren't going to get a new couch ever. And
Right.
And I didn't mean that. What I meant was, I wish I had said, I'd love to get a new couch. Let's try to figure out how to work it into this budget that we're trying to live on. And yet it was, we're never going to get a new couch. And
And I think we're all guilty of it because communication, I mean, the thing that defines it is a two-way medium. Like, you have the person who has to accept the information, and a good communicator kind of confirms, did you understand what I was saying in some form or fashion?
or offers back, you asked for this and this and this. I can give you the one, but the second one is going to be a problem. Let's think if we can do the third one like next week.
Right.
And come back with what I can give you out of what you asked for. And I say, okay, well, 1 and 3 is good enough for you now. So let's keep talking about that second thing, and we'll try to work that out too. But so there needs to be I heard it, and here's what I can do out of that.
Right.
And here's what I think I need from you.
But it takes, again, the vulnerability in both people
be
being
able-
receptive,
that's
just as
right, to
receptive.
be able to-
And it's hard to be that when feelings are involved and there's any frustration or anger or resentment.
I think reminding that like you're on the same team. Like it's not like
Because it's
You're
not about
trying-
this. It's not about the couch. It's not the nail.
Yeah, it's not
about
like
the
you're not
nail.
trying to mess with me and be like, haha, you can get a couch ever because I'm like your parent. Like that.
I know.
You have to remember that you
But
have good
that's-
intentions.
That's what I was going to say when you guys were talking about communication. That's definitely a piece, and people are capable of communicating. Sometimes with the communication is the level of emotional maturity. So like
Well, yes.
sometimes when you're having like these conversations, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes one of the partners might fall short, and it could be either one, it depends on what topic or what thing you're discussing. So that level of maturity plays a big role too, because like how you said, if she or he thinks like they're never getting a couch, well, you're reacting at that point. You're not even pausing and like having a conversation.
And it's not always, I agree. It's more oftentimes like the EQ and the willingness, but sometimes it is literally learned behavior. Because I consider myself a great communicator, and I have been shown with like evidence right in front of me reading a text. I read words that weren't there because I'm like, last time this happened, this person said this. And I'm just saying, this was even with a friend. I'm like, you said this, it's because you're trying to say I'm an asshole. And it's like, where did I say that? I'm like, let me well, fuck. Okay. Well, I am an asshole, but for a different reason. It's like, so because emotions are involved, and emotions are rarely logical or rational. And so sometimes it's maturity, and sometimes it's just raw emotion that is, you're filtering all of that through. So of course it's always gonna be tough, but I think what makes a marriage healthy versus unhealthy is at all times, not every single communication, not every single day, not every single moment, but the overarching thing is we are on the same team. Because as soon as it's you versus me, you can drill down that hole, and that's where it all goes awry.
Driven to distraction, living on emptiness.
To help us through the breakup, the musician spotlight for this episode is on Bronx-based singer-songwriter Gabrielle Sterbenz. Starting off singing in her high school's gospel choir, she went on to tour as a backing vocalist for Wheatus and Mike Doty, as well as late-night TV appearances with Robbie Dupree and Lorde. Gabrielle has also opened for Wheatus as a solo artist on 3 international tours. During the pandemic, Gabrielle began working on her forthcoming solo album with multi-platinum producer Philip Jimenez in his Long Island studio. Finding herself back in her childhood hometown, she remembers spending much of her time alone in her room, singing along to Linda Ronstadt, Ella Fitzgerald, and Aretha Franklin. This album is set to release in spring 2024. The influences of country, the American songbook, and gospel are still evident in all her music. You can find her at GabrielleSterbenz.com, STERBENZ.
To the west. Can't turn back, it's too late to start again. Try to pull myself together, might as well hit the pedal instead. Oh, oh, oh. Can't let go, but I'm losing to the beast inside. It never lets up, feels like there is no end in sight. I'm running low, I'm running low, but I can't stop now, driving down to the rest. Oh, you stop, driving down to the rest. Can't turn back, it's too late to start again. Try to pull myself together. Will it be like this forever? Will I ever learn to turn it
We've all kind of talked about some reasons that it can kind of blow up and end. And the thing that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is it sucks. Breakups suck. Breakups of any kind. Losing a friend sometimes can feel harder than anything, because you have somebody who you cared about, who cared about you. And even if you walk away from each other as enemies, which is actually harder, it doesn't change what happened in the past, but now you're trying to like figure out how it fits into your world. So like, let's talk about some of the things that suck about getting divorced, about a breakup of any kind of like long-term relationship. I'll say one thing is, At first, I hated telling people. One of the things that I don't think most people think about, unless you're like out there trying to get people on your team and hating the other person, which of course is never how, I would operate in any kind of relationship. I just hated telling people. In fact, I think I texted you. Did I text you or did I call you?
I think it was electronic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like a dirty secret. It's almost like there is some form of degradation that goes along with it. Like we're talking success and failure. Even somebody who does not buy into all of those norms, who doesn't measure it that way. Like I actually had, and some people could disagree, I don't know. I will tell you, my most recent marriage, I would consider it a successful marriage. It ended. That doesn't mean that it was a worthless waste of time. I have no regrets about it. It ending has sucked. I mean, for both of us. And it is like one of the most painful experiences ever. But there's this part of you, of these people you've let into your life, and there's that overlap. So you've also let them into your relationship in some form or fashion. And telling them is like having to tell them that, you killed their cat on accident. It's this horrible feeling. And so I didn't want to tell anybody at first. If I could tell them in person, at least I could gauge the reaction, because there's some part of me, and it's not pride. I don't know what it is, and maybe the therapists on both sides can tell me what it is. I hate when people give me pity, especially if I don't deserve it, and I didn't feel deserving of it. I just felt like I'm in a shitty situation. But everyone's initial thing when you tell them that is going to be, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're like, oh, that hurts. And you're like, that makes me want to throw up.
Right.
I'd rather someone just be like, actually, Peter's response was the perfect response. We need to grab a beer. That was it. I'm not saying he didn't say anything after that, but that was it. And that was the perfect response. But I also cannot put my expectations of how people respond to it on them.
But you can. You can say, hey, listen, I don't want you to go, oh, I'm so sorry. I want you to go, congratulations. I hope you're happy. When, you know what I mean?
I didn't want that either. I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to not tell people. You're right.
Right.
But then you're also trying to control the narrative and the communication with that person.
But then you have to backtrack if someone goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no, it's good. This is a good thing.
So put the good thing up front.
Put it up front.
In what you're saying.
Right,
So
communicate that.
When we sat the kids down.
Or maybe it's
It
not
is.
a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm really broke up about it, but I don't want to hear pity about it.
Sure.
I did do that. And I felt
Yeah.
even dirtier doing that, because I felt like I was controlling
You're
what
allowed
they
to
wanted
set
to naturally
boundaries.
feel.
You're
Yeah, see,
allowed
you're
to set your own boundaries.
I understand. But it's also like if somebody tells me something, I want to tell them how I feel for them as a human and as a friend.
But you don't know.
Well, no, I'm saying like would sell, look, everything's fine. It's amicable. It's blah, blah, blah. I just want to let you know. But it's like I found myself over-explaining when I should have just been a grown man and said, I just want to let you know this is it. And just accept what comes back. The fear was someone was going to be an asshole. And there were a couple of those situations. Even if they were trying to be funny, there were two people who were like, what'd you do? And the one guy I didn't know very well. And I just said, ha, fuck you. The other person I said, if you weren't my very close friend, I might punch you in the face right now. Read the room. Yeah. So I think that also was like, I also don't want that nonsense. But it's like, I'm asking for the impossible. Don't react.
You're not asking for anything, though.
I know. I was sharing information because I felt like I had to. I guess that's why it sucked, because I didn't want to talk about it yet.
Yeah.
Sure. And I would expect that you'd be concerned that I'm going to feel sad
Yes.
for you.
Yeah.
And because you're my buddy, you don't want me to feel sad
Yeah, it's like,
about
this
anything.
is already ruining my life. Why would I let it ruin yours?
Let me, you know?
I know.
Let me just say, all right, beer, we're going to sit and talk.
So
Because-
that's my point, is I should have given people the grace and been able to say, oh, I trust these people they know me well
Oh my
enough
God, he's learned something. Okay, good.
that Peter likes beer. It's like, hey, Peter, I got a new job. Let's grab a beer.
It's got to wrap the room.
Hey, Peter, it snowed today.
part
Let's
of
grab a
that,
beer.
part of that, I fully support. You know, that there's a way you can set it up to get more of what you want out of the exchange. When she and I had decided, we sat my two girls down who are in town and said, hey, come on over Thursday night because we want to talk a little bit. Well, they knew what the news was going to be. All right, so that wasn't the issue. But it was, we've been working on this. We've been struggling for a decade. We had good counseling. We're still stuck. We're not going to stay stuck anymore. But we're not going to fight. So we're hoping that you two won't think that you need to pick sides out of this.
That's good.
And instead, just keep making the invites, keep sharing your information, and we'll do what we can do. Well, like 10 days later, parents of the football player, lacrosse player, are like, well, it doesn't matter. We're sitting in the stands watching, and I sat on that side of them, and she sat on that side of them, and the four of us watched the game. And it's worked, and I love her for it, because she was big enough to be able to, to make that and let that work. But we were very intentional about your great point. What do we want out of this right now? Mm-hmm. And we wanted to keep those 5 grandkids.
Yeah.
And we wanted to keep the 2 sets of parents. So, okay, how are we going to do that? Well, tell them what we don't want and tell them what we do want. And God bless those kids. It's working.
Yeah. I think kids probably makes it harder than anything to have it, because now it's like, me, I don't have children. So when my relationships have ended, it's not that there's not all these things that tie you to the person, but kids is a whole different dynamic. I can only imagine that makes everything that much more difficult, because there's still there's a connection to that person in more cases than not, right?
Yeah. So my oldest is 7 and my youngest is 3. So, a 7-year-old has things that they do and a 3-year-old has things that they do. So co-parenting with 2 children and doing it in an amicable way has challenges, but also keeping the mindset of, what's most important, being able to honor boundaries and also look in their best interests, not from, my opinion, and also respecting him, because at the end of the day, that's their dad. So whatever my feelings are towards him and vice versa, the children shouldn't be, collateral damage between that.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we both did a good job at. And it didn't happen initially, right away.
Sure.
It was, trial and error and getting used to things. But the best advice would be to keep them at the forefront, keep your feelings, because my feelings of him as a husband is different than my feelings of him as a father. And as long as they have a healthy, supportive father in their life, that's great for me and that's great for them.
Wise this one is.
Yeah. It takes somebody with a lot of emotional intelligence to feel that way, because separating the person as a spouse
Right.
and a parent, or even as a spouse and a person, as a friend, as whatever, I think it's hard for people to do, because when it ends, of course, you're focusing on all of the reason that it ended. And if you're doing it in an unhealthy way, you're focusing on all the things you don't like about the person, right? Instead of seeing the good in it. I mean, just me personally, the way my brain works, I don't ever want to look back and be like, well, that was a wasted time, because it's not. Even some of the bad things in life are good learning lessons.
For me personally, when I was going through my divorce, all my friends were women who were in marriages. I didn't have a divorced friend. I remember when I was talking to my one therapist, I was like, I don't have a person that I can, that I can ask for advice. So I feel like I'm just learning. And it's so funny because my circle now is so different. And so there's things that come up where I was like, okay, because I just want to hold on to them because to me, they're my babies, right? But then I'll have a friend who's like, hey, my daughter is this old right now. And when her dad wanted to do this, and it's just so nice to have people to rely on. Yeah. And it's not like you're going to them for everything. You're using your judgment and making the decisions for yourself and your family. But it helps alleviate some of the things because some of it is just a fear, like an uncertainty. But then when you have somebody to like kind of just talk it through and then get a different perspective, I'm like, you know what, you're right. I'm going to try that. And it helps.
And having a filter, having enough confidence from within to have a filter, because you'll get somebody who wants there to be sides and they're like, right. I always hated that person. Yep. And there's that person, or there's the person who, maybe you have a religious friend or family member who's like, you should stay married for the kids. I'm telling you, I hope you guys relearn this. And so having that filter that says, what happened, and I am confident in my decisions, and here's how I'm going to move forward. But it is nice to have support. I actually, when I got divorced the first time, I was expecting some blowback from some of the more staunch conservative family members. And even the most religious of the people in my world were actually very supportive. I think probably because they saw the issues, but also the only person who just didn't know what to say, and a lot of people don't, but my dad, who just didn't have the depth, and I think in his own way he was being as supportive as he could. He just all he could say was, I just never wanted to see any of my kids get divorced. And he kept talking about it so somber, and I'm like, yes, but if it's for a good thing to move forward. And it's not that he was saying you shouldn't do it. It was just, that was probably the only even I wouldn't even call it negative. That was the only neutral thing. Everything else was I'm sorry for you, but I'm here for you. And that was great. But Peter, what's one of the worst parts about divorce?
There is the inevitable feeling of failure. Sure. Because no matter how we came to it, cultural expectation or whatever. At some point we said yes, and then whatever we did in between that and this, we put ourselves into it. We invested. Sometimes better than others, sure. Sometimes more surely than others, sure. But, we had skin in the game. And this is now something that I was not successful at. That hurts some. Yeah. And the loss of a friend. Yeah. Because although we ended up stuck, we had some really good years, and we came together in middle life, and at that point, who knows, but here was somebody that and chocolate, dark chocolate, okay, we got something to start talking about, and we built something from there, and had a lot of good times. And made, good friends, and that's another part of it. It's not just, you and her, or him, him and her. It's the intimate circle around them, the closest friends around them, and that hurts, when you have to recognize, I didn't make that. Yeah. Now. On my part, the hurt has been mitigated because those friends have been great, and they heard the same. We're not fighting. We're hoping you won't pick. So when the dinner club from before, decided, hey, we got to have a picnic because of this, the one couple is back from their European trip. We got to find out how that went. We all came, and both she and I got big hugs from, everybody else in the dinner club. It should have been, because it's the dinner club. Come on, these are the people we spent all those evenings with. But you never know,
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing you're putting at risk when you go, hey, Matt, this didn't work, But in our case, they have all been extremely supportive. And I think that's, to the next question on your list, what do you do when you're facing the stuff that sucks? Is look for those kind of people that can be there for you and will be there for you.
Yeah.
Don't expect it because you don't know for sure, and you'll have be disappointed. But
You don't know.
But be open enough. Don't be so far into your shit that you don't let somebody who can, support you.
That's kind of what I was getting at myself. And I think it's because, and this might be, I don't think it's unique to me. I think it's kind of universal, but mine was extreme. And this is both marriages, but even the first one that was like, it was kind of a happy ending when it ended, was I put so much of myself into everything that I do, every relationship, that I just felt like I lost so much at the end of it. And I think that's important to share because I can't imagine I'm the only one. And some people might go, oh, well, then maybe you didn't know who you were. No, I've always known who I was. Like, that's something I think people know about me. Like, I know who I am. I have this inner confidence. But it still feels like you're drifting at sea sometimes after the fact. Not because you don't know who you are, but I don't know anything else about the world as I knew it. Like, I'm now a foreigner in my own world. And because I don't know how some of these former friends and family are going to react. I don't know what this means. Is Peter going to drink me under the table? There's all these things that we don't know about. And sometimes the unknown is fun and adventurous and breeds curiosity. But sometimes it's like, I am so emotionally exhausted. I need some kind of solid footing. And the term limbo is could kind of encompass my parts of my post-marriage timelines. And you just feel like, for me, I will personally say both times felt like I lost too much. And so then the question is, Matt, why would you get remarried? Well, because the marriage themselves couldn't have been more different. Because I was like, I'm never doing that again. And then it turns out it ended similarly in some ways, but it doesn't change the fact that the two marriages themselves couldn't have been more different. And that's the thing that, as somebody who likes to connect dots and learn, it's a hard pill to swallow. What do I learn from that? I think what I learned that I brought to this today is each marriage, each relationship is so unique. And even if the challenges and the problems and all that are very different, it doesn't mean it's going to be successful or healthy. It's making me rethink what I even believe about relationships in general, not just romantic ones. But I'll say for me, and it's certainly because I've already said I don't want pity. It's not for pity. I want to share because I want other people who've been out there who feel that to know that you're not alone. I feel like I lost so much of myself that what was left was too little to be a whole human. And that has been the toughest thing. And I've been doing the work and I've been going to therapy and I have people like Peter who, I call him up. He's like, what the fuck do you want? And I'm like, oh, I need to talk to real Peter. He's like, oh, hold on. How can I help you, Matt? And then suddenly.
And there are people like that for you. And the Catholic the Catholic kid would observe that limbo is, you're there and you got a term to, and instead I'd invite you to think about liminal space. It's the doorway.
Absolutely.
That's the definition. And you're at the point where there's a room behind you but there's a room in front of you.
But what
And-
makes it feel like purgatory is because all the logic in the world, I can say those same words, but I don't feel it.
Okay.
And I'm not saying right now, but
No,
I
no.
mean in general.
Okay.
I can intellectualize all of these things, but feeling it, that's the whole thing. And this whole thing is about feelings, right? It's about how it impacts you, how it makes you feel. Everything you said, I agree with. My emotional side's like, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about, Peter. I'm just
So, Doc. And you're right. No, but you're right, because intellect and emotion. So
But would you feel like you're grieving? Do you
Oh,
feel like you're in
yeah.
the process of grieving, and
Yes.
that's something you can't think your way through or out of, really? I know it, not to discredit somebody who experienced a loss through a death, but it's the death of a relationship.
Yes, and that you put it into better words than what I was saying. The grieving process, I've grieved the loss of the person, I've grieved the loss of the relationship. I am still grieving the loss of myself, the pieces that I talked about, and that is a unique type of grief that has no curriculum, and it is very untreaded in so many ways for me personally, because of who I am. And that is the thing that makes the grieving process harder. I will say, I'm not judging myself for it. Like I'm comfortable with it. In fact, I told my therapist at one point, she was like, well, what's next? I feel like we're stuck. And I would go, honestly, I need to just wade in these murky waters and be here for a while. I've not allowed myself to process and just be depressed for a little bit, because life wouldn't allow me to, It went from my basement flooding to crazy amount of work schedule at work, and it's like I needed some time. And so I've been through that, and it's just, for me, it's just new territory. That's all. But it's not like, it's not even all bad. Some of it's positive. These are lessons I had to learn, so I don't repeat some of the, I don't even want to say mistakes, but you don't retread some of the territory that isn't going to work out the way that is beneficial to me in the next, any type of relationship, romantic or otherwise. So what then do you do after the dust settles? You've done the work. You're probably more towards the tail end of it, and I'm in the midst of it. And you deal with people doing this all the time.
It's a good opportunity to evaluate where am I grieving the loss of the expectations I had for this relationship, and thinking about how you want to live today and how you want to live tomorrow, and how, I don't know, I think there's a reminder that I think it's really unsettling and super insulting if you stayed married to me and you didn't want to be. And then people are like, oh, that's a successful relationship. I think that would be one of the most hurtful things you could do to me, right? We've talked about that. And so sometimes it's a way to you get another opportunity to do what you want to do. But hopefully, you do that with somebody, regardless if you're married or not. So I don't know, an opportunity to think your basement flooded. Our basement just flooded. Tragic, but it's an opportunity to start over, right? We wouldn't have done it had we not been forced to. Yeah. But it's an opportunity that I didn't necessarily want, but I'm going to make the most out of it. And maybe it won't be as bad when it floods again, And so I think a lot of it is mentality, and a lot of it is just what are you willing to do? Like at the end of the day, when you're, we're on our deathbeds, we always say, like, what are the 3 ways you want someone to describe you? And can you be that person regardless if you're married, going through a divorce, anxious, depressed, whatever, and being able to be the person you want to be no matter what you're going through?
What did your rediscovery look like? You shared some things with me offline.
Yeah. So
You're a very different person now from what it sounds like you were when you were married.
So different. So, the marriage ended, the divorce finalized. Now we're each on our own. The kids are cared for now, like we're on our new path, right? So I was lucky in the fact that I had an amazing community through fitness. And I chose to work out because it helped. It helped me during my divorce process. It helped me in other aspects, So when my divorce finalized, the gym that I belonged to was doing like a tour. So they would do these trips. And I used to love traveling. And then obviously with children and then with the divorce, traveling and COVID, like I wasn't going anywhere. Okay.
Yeah. The three of us were married during COVID. That alone, we should give ourselves a lot of grace for.
So I took that.
And you too, especially.
I took it as an opportunity, and how you said mentality. I was like, it was like a whole renewal of like a mindset, and the fitness definitely helped that. But I would take these trips, and other people from the gym would go, but I would do it as solo. And I wanted that time by myself. I wanted to like lean in and just try new experiences. I wanted to get comfortable with doing things alone.
Yeah.
In each trip, I would have like different experiences. I'm like, oh, that was fun. It was just like building up those things that I kind of lost for a period of time, and I made friends, and being able to let them know, hey, I want to do this on my own. And whether or not they were offended or not, I was still, it was just like so empowering each time. So I was lucky in the fact that I had that. I didn't use things as a distraction, but
Which I think distractions to a point are okay. I think it's I think it's healthy that you identified what's a distraction, what's a sustainable lifestyle that makes me happy, makes me fulfilled.
Yeah. And if it felt like it was a distraction, then I would, pull back. But just, going through it with an open mind, an open heart, not to be all closed off and bitter. Because for a period of time, I was very bitter. I isolated. I didn't want to talk to anybody, and COVID helped because we were isolating anyhow. So I didn't even have to explain, I didn't have to explain myself because I'm like, COVID, and so that helped me at that time tremendously. But life is good on this side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you were to have this podcast like a few years ago, I wouldn't be the same person. You know what I mean? I wasn't at that point. And I never wanted to pretend. I feel like I did so much pretending that I'm like, I don't want to pretend. If I'm not, I'm just going to be quiet.
Yeah. Peter, what does...
I'm just going to be quiet.
What does future Peter look like? What's left? What is there to do? What makes you happy? How are you finding it?
Busy, different busy, but busy. I've gotten more active. I've gotten more active. I put more of myself into some of the things that I have enjoyed in the past. Community theater, so they've been bugging me to sit on the board and help there for a decade. So now I said yes. And the softball league needed an umpire in chief, so I said yes. And in both of those cases, they weren't just the first chip that hit the table. There were things that I was involved with before, so I'm not flitting around doing a whole lot of new stuff. I want to try this, I want to try that, I want to try that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you didn't go through like another midlife crisis? You didn't buy a Corvette?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Call me when you do.
Okay. And I have allowed the support that I had around me. I've allowed it access. I've answered the phone calls. Frank, lunch? Yeah. Okay. Let's go do that. And my guys have stepped. I belong to it was a spiritual retreat weekend, and it morphed. That was 17 years ago. It morphed into every other Tuesday morning we spent 2 hours together. So those guys have stepped up wonderfully, and I allowed that. I opened I recognized, that liminal space suggestion a minute ago was a realization that I had come to, and I am terribly blessed by it, because okay, what's out there that I want either more of or and I'm comfortable with that. Have been spent a little more time with grandkids and stuff, and I like that a lot. So it's a question of, I think, understanding self.
Yeah.
In a more global, that was me. Understanding self, figuring out what works for self, and then figuring out where are safe and productive places to look for some of that.
Yeah, there's a reason I asked the people at the table, because there's so much like emotional intelligence and maturity there. And even myself, like I was mad at myself because I was even disciplined in the way I handled the grieving process. I was like, why don't I just go on a bender, do some lines of coke and a hooker or something like that? But instead I decided to do healthy things, and I piss myself off sometimes. But even what you guys are saying is really important, because I think some people might, again, with their filter goes, well, that just means you can't do those things when you're married, and that's why marriages fail. And it's like, no. You could have done all these things possibly, right? But we often are so focused on the fact that there's two people and personalities and everything else. Like, it's just the setting was different, and that maybe we didn't think, and that sometimes I lost a piece of myself because I chose to do that, not because it was asked of me. And I think it's important to identify those things. So I'm really happy you guys are finding and have found what fulfills you. And, if somebody comes along who matches that energy, that's awesome. If they don't, you're both very self-sufficient and healthy and happy people, and that's what's most important.
No, I think what you guys are talking about, the way you're living now that you're not married, I'm like, I feel like that's how we live. Like, I just went on vacation without him. You go out with friends. I mean, we both do things to make sure that we're being the best. I don't feel like, I don't know. I feel like every day I wake up and it's still a choice, and I don't feel judged ever by you. And I don't think it's, look, we figured it all out, but I don't think, I think a lot of it's a mentality and a choice and an intention and dealing with our own mental health shit as well. So,
Yeah.
But.
No, I think you're right. I mean,
Obviously
you're right. It's very rare that you're not. But
indirectly just showed what a healthy marriage looks like.
But also, we don't have it all figured out.
No.
And I think that for people, that's something I was able to give myself. And thank you for saying those words, because that's part of what I was trying to describe with that allowing myself to be in liminal space. I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to have answers. I just have to have good questions, and both the guts and the strength to go out and work on good answers.
Yeah.
I don't have to have it figured out right.
Having all the answers makes life more boring anyway. Yeah. It's just when you can view the curiosity as a positive thing again, where you can be excited about the opportunities that the future hold instead of trying to deter or eliminate the blowback or the heartache that those future things might be. And you're there. I am trying every day to get to that point again. And I'll get there.
You will.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, we asked the question, is divorce the end? The answer is that's completely up to you. I would say no, it's not. What can come next, I know from having gone through it before, is an even more compassionate, more better communicator, this version of you that maybe you haven't even dreamt of yet. Maybe there's a more fulfilled, happier, kinder, more of an asset to the world that you live in. Maybe that's what's next. And I think what everyone's shared, the one thing we definitely all agree on is that is entirely up to you. And so thank you for sharing your stories, your thoughts. Thank you for showing all of us men how we're the worst husbands in the world in comparison to you. And you know what else can come next is dating. And what the hell does modern dating even look like? Well, we're going to answer that question on the season finale coming up next. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. We just went there. Now you can go to thegoingtherepodcast.com for links to all the podcast platforms, our socials, and of course, YouTube. While you're at it, give us a rating, share with a friend, and subscribe. Good music will help you get through any breakup. Check out Gabrielle Sterbenz at GabrielleSterbenz.com, STERBENZ.
You pretend that you don't see. She knew you give up easily.
This podcast is made possible by its hosts and Frame One Media in association with Joe Calley and Bobby Thomas.